Hey guys, so yeah, my name is Alina. If you haven't been in the M-Word panel earlier today, it's me again. I'm a XR researcher and product designer for project manager for 3D Interactive. We also have a booth here. And besides that, I'm managing director of OpenAI Cloud Europe, which is basically the hat that I'm wearing today because we got funded for our XR for Human project, which will be kicking off next month officially, and we'll be working on the next 3 years. So while we were working on our submission is like one major challenge that currently companies, developers, creatives have is, and society, that we all have different interests, right? And that is a huge challenge, and that leads to social technical feedback loops. And this is why it is important that we start bridging the gap between research, academia, and industry. And yeah, without that further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my panelists. And first of all, we are really sorry, but our fourth speaker, Leon, he couldn't physically be here with us, but yeah, he's here literally in spirit, so yeah.
I work at TNO in the Netherlands, and I've been working for quite some time on advanced artificial intelligence systems, and some 5-6 years ago I also went into the research on AI ethics and how AI could behave in certain ethical, acceptable ways. And then also what came with that is basically the safety and security issue of artificial intelligence. And I also went into research on how the combination of artificial intelligence with virtual reality and how virtual reality could also help in the safety and security of both AI and virtual reality itself.
Yeah, and why don't you introduce yourself, Julia, as well?
Yeah, thanks, Alina. I'm also very happy to be here. My name is Julia from the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, and there from the Institute for Technology Assessment and Systems Analysis. And I've been working on technology assessment or in this area for quite some time. And technology assessment is really about integrating different perspectives of stakeholders, citizens, into technology development, but also policy advice for science and technology policy making. So this is something I've been working on. I've also worked in several European projects on responsible research and innovation. This was a strong concept on the European level. And during the panel, I'll also provide some insights from projects I've worked on and how to integrate different perspectives into technology development, because this has really been a focus of mine, where I work with engineers, natural scientists, and am kind of an embedded technology assessment person in these projects.
Yeah, and then last, without further ado, you, Mildred.
So I will be faster because I'm from the same institute doing similar things. Maybe I should add more of the policy advisory aspect that we have, because it's quite important. That's part of our discussion a little bit. But we're heavily involved in direct policy advice, and that translates into running the Parliamentary Office of Technology Assessment for the German Bundestag, the German Parliament. Also working for the European Parliament, who have done some similar or at least related work to our topics today. And we are also part of the European Parliamentary Technology Assessment, which, although it says European, but it also involves the GAO, actually TA colleagues from the US Congress and parliamentary offices from Europe and beyond. And this beyond is also a global technology assessment network that Julia and I are coordinating. So we're kind of trying to get think tanks that work for governments, for ministries, for parliaments in the area of science and technology. Basically, and XR is also something new, but very important actual area that we're working on.
So you might have asked yourself, okay, so why is Leon here with his huge knowledge and experience in AI? I mean, if you haven't been to SIGGRAPH this year, AI is getting more and more important for our work in XR. And it's not just only AI, it's the convergence of all these emerging technologies. So when we were working on our proposal last year, we actually think there are a lot of emerging challenges on any emerging technologies. Is it real-time data capture, AI, deep learning? So what we think is really important, and that's why our talk today is about the crossing of industry. And it's literally not just the crossing of academia and industry, but also the importance of us in XR building bridges between other emerging tech and sort of getting this sort of bird's eye view, because we also see a lot of challenges emerge in AI, and they've literally been around for over 20 years. So there's also a lot of knowledge that is not shared with us. And why should we reinvent the wheel? Why shouldn't we sort of build the bridges with other technologies and with other experts? So yeah, and coming back to that full circle, cross-industry collaboration is needed, and can we push a closer collaboration between academia and sort of the lack of governance, both related to AI, but also development and XR? So, yeah.
He agrees.
Yeah, so the third thing I think we need to acknowledge is that all the behavior of this technology, so AI and VR, the combination of the two, is basically the result of human design and also the data that has been put in by humans. Even if we look at, for example, very advanced AI, self-learning AI systems, still the data is being selected often by humans. The representations are still often chosen by humans, and the algorithms are still, so the whole design for a large part is still decided by humans, which basically still determines the behavior of even the most advanced AI systems. And so this is why we need to then think about, okay, if we want to influence the behavior, then, and that is always human determined, then how can humans actually then determine this type of behavior? And particularly if we also think about ethical behavior of it's kind of an anthropomorphism even to talk about ethical behaving AI or VR technology. But at least we have to, as humans, have to specify in some way what we want from this type of technology in terms also of its ethical behavior, of its moral behavior. So we humans need to somehow specify that in mathematical terms, because mathematics is the only thing that this type of technology can process. So we need to have actually a theory on how we could represent our more intuition in some mathematical way. We know already that what humans do can, at the moment at least, not really be specified in mathematical terms, but at least we can, from a scientific perspective, understand what better representations would be for our more intuitions. And therefore we could see how we could improve on the current representations we have, and how actually the behavior of these type of systems is determined, how we can improve on that.
So you've been also advising the EU, but been around in sort of ethical AI engineering and advising for a couple of years. So could you maybe emphasize what are current challenges and
so let me go back to it. We have this ethical guidance, or basically the elephant in the room, the moral dilemmas, which we are also trying to implement in our work, and sort of how can we learn in our project from AI. But all these frameworks that we're setting up will be nothing without tools, right? So what tools are needed then for these frameworks that we're setting up? Basically providing the creators and municipalities and guiding them. Yeah, Julia, can you give some input about that?
Yeah, I can try at least. So I mean, what I do a lot in my work is looking at how we can develop processes within technology development or also policy advice that can enable a kind of more inclusivity, diversity, but also a sort of responsiveness. So how can I respond to emerging ethical issues, for example? How can I also forecast maybe things that might happen, so anticipate things, and how can I integrate this throughout the technology development? And I've worked on one project which really tried to develop a kind of roadmap or guideline with tools for responsible research and innovation, which is how we termed it, but it's really about how to integrate aspects of reflection, anticipation, inclusiveness, so including potential users, stakeholders, citizens, vulnerable groups, for example, and to be in a way more responsive. So the idea there is that we develop a kind of more holistic concept, and it's about creating a kind of vision or an awareness that these are important issues that we need to, from the top leadership to the technology developer, this needs to be something, there needs to be a kind of shared vision on why is it important that we act more responsibly or that we integrate these aspects. And then we can look at the context in which the technology is going to take place. Where do we want to use it? In which settings, in schools, in hospitals, or in entertainment areas. So this means can mean very different things, because we need to understand what potential impacts this technology might have, also for different groups. So it's about identifying quite specifically ethical issues, legal issues, regulatory issues as well, but also social issues. And then we go a step further where we try to really self-assess. So we look at what are the risks and barriers of this technology, or also what are the risks of using this technology in this context maybe. What are the drivers also? Why do we want to do this? We heard this morning in your panel. What problem is the M word, the metaverse, solving? So I think this is also a key question. Why are we doing this? And then we try to identify stakeholders and engage with them, include their knowledge, their background. Then it's really about testing certain, or experimenting with engagement methods. So we try to use different forms of including these stakeholders, and then developing along or co-creating these ethical guidelines. And one important aspect is also measuring of how much or what impact did our actions have, what are missing points, so a kind of continuous reflection or assessment of the action. So this is something we can do throughout the development of a technology or a product.
And most importantly, this is a question to you, Miltos. Why do you think current legislation, or we need a new form of legislation for XR? And what is the problem with today's legislation, basically?
Well, whether we need a new legislation, let's see. And the problems that we have with new legislation also led me a little bit, before bashing the GDPR. It's a great piece of legislation. It has taken a long time, and to bring it up, it's one of the most human-centered, personal data respecting legislation in the world. It has been followed widely, actually. It has been debated around the world. It has been followed widely, and as far as I'm, not only I am concerned, but many people are concerned, it has been imitated even in China, because, in case you don't know, the personal data protection legislation in China is based on the GDPR. Whatever that means, but we're not going into that. So GDPR is good, but GDPR still is under a better understanding, and especially when it comes to this type of new data that we get with XR technologies, which are far, far more intimate and detailed data than we usually are faced with in other areas, in other technological, or even in the clinical, in the medical sector. To start with, we need to decide, and it seems that that might be the idea, that this is special categories data that one can get through XR, because that combines biometric data, facial recognition. It combines also new types of spatial identification data, like kinetic fingerprinting, behavioral, for example, data that can identify you straightforward, actually, in the biometric sense. So if that is the case, then we're talking about great restrictions in how one can accumulate and process and protect this type of data. And we will need what we call a personal data impact assessment in every type of application, if that is the case. But it's under consideration. But it seems that there we do have some way to go. You want to ask something, or should I?
Yeah, continue. And then we gonna let the cat out of the sack, right?
The cats. Well, let's see about the cats. Consent. Once you have such intimate data, which, by the way, they are the hundredth, power of the hundredth of what data we can get in any other possible way out of the person. We have million data points per minute that we gather for a piece of through these XR, let's say, applications. So what does it mean in terms of consent, of personal consent? Can you opt out from a biometric identification if you are a user of XR? What is the control you have of your personal data? You're not meant to have a control in the GDPR system. What is the control that you have in this case? Can you switch off particular functionalities in the system, for instance? And should that be required? And also, what happens to the non-user data that are gathered through the XR system, like the augmented reality, for example, systems? And that takes us to the data ownership, and then we go into the whole area of the ownership of data. So who owns the data that they are accumulated through the AR, for example, augmented reality the system? Should we have a possibility for an opt-out, like we have with Google Maps, for the non-users, for instance? Still areas that need to be clarified, and whatever, we plan to do that. But when we go now to individual and social aspects of this data, so we can enhance our cognitive capacities through XR systems, which is desirable. Actually, we can even use it for therapeutic purposes. One of our PhD students, she did actually that. She a psychologist. She used it she used the VR system as a therapeutic therapy against acrophobia, which is height phobia, and it seems to be very, very promising, as a matter of fact. But what does that mean in terms of manipulation of people? Once you can solve their mental problems, you can also use it on the dark side, actually, to manipulate behavior, and if we had a Cambridge Analytica, let's say, problem in the past, that can be in the 100th, again, degree in terms of accuracy of manipulation than what Cambridge Analytica could do with this kind of data. So I'll try to finish. So we need to identify actually where does that fall under also what we have now, the AI framework, for example, which is a risk-based approach. So we need to find out and to identify what kind of risk we are talking about here, because the risk will also show us how much restrictions we should put into this system. This is not clear yet. And we also have the Digital Services Act, where we have the basic legislation around social media platforms, but there we also have a lot of a gray area in what the platform should do in order to avoid manipulation through also VR-based, like deepfakes, for example, the systems. It's not clear how to identify what is a non-legal use of the platform and what is their responsibility around that. And also we need also to figure out how to incorporate non-deceptive practices for the social media platforms themselves from their own design. That we don't have yet. So finally,
but we're getting there.
Yes.
And you're actually the first people to see this. So XR for Human, you will be hearing more the next 3 years, because we'll be working on it the next 3 years with the funding we just get, and we'll be kicking off actually officially next month. So I'm really proud to share this with amongst all of you who are now in the room. Yeah, this is us. But what are we trying to do? So you heard about the challenges that we are facing, and basically what we came up throughout the discussion is we'll be working on some underlying building blocks. But when I say building blocks, literally throughout the whole process of our submission, we came across a lot of challenges, and we started to actually also question today's linear legislation, which doesn't really apply with all these convergence of technologies with XR, AI, real-time data capture, because we're dealing with contextual-based technology. So why isn't legislation also contextual? So what we are going to do, and what we are going to be working on with this amazing 12-party consortium the next 3 years, is we are gonna be working on some building blocks. Like literally, when we say about building blocks, literally think about a Lego set. So what we try to set up is basically legislation or guidelines and frameworks to guide politicians and municipalities who are be setting up more and more digital twins and have digital twin projects. So what we're going to be working on is this sort of Lego set building block framework. And based on various scenarios, you then detach or add certain aspects that need to be maintained by those scenarios. And I mean, we are always having this sort of weird debates amongst XR people. It's like, yeah, but why do we need another legislation? It's restraining advancements and innovation. So I think we also need to start rethinking the current system and current linear legislation, and also start to guide those lawmakers and we as experts be in a room, and we need to guide them because, I mean, yeah. So, and what we are going to do, we'll be working on these building blocks, setting up for interoperability, a guideline, but more importantly, what we don't want to be the next 3 years, working on a framework that ends up after EU funding, and I mean, we are at the EU conference, so a couple of people know this, end up with a project that ends in the storage. So what was really important for us to not just come out building a framework on a scrap piece of paper. So what we are going to do is we'll be working with Kirchheim. It's a project funded by BMBF, like a German-funded project. They'll be setting up parallel while we'll be working on our framework, a digital twin project. And Milters and I, we've been to Kirchheim this year. They are in the first year. They are applying a lot of sensors into their city already today. But then we start talking, okay, and where's the data stored? And what are you thinking? I mean, literally, you're looking into faces who have no answers. So it's basically the best test bed, a real-life test bed where we are able to also test our framework and make sure to have something, an EU project that is applicable and scalable, not just only for cities, but also for companies. up to come and not end up with a theory that has nothing to do with the real life. So yeah, what's going to be your part in this, Miltos?
In this project?
Yes.
Well, try to do our best. And first of all, as I said, have done some work already, actually some preliminary work trying to advise our policymakers, because also they had no idea of what the implications of this type of technologies are. And we're also learning ourselves, as you do, all of you do, I suppose, what are really the capabilities of these technologies. But for us, we need this kind of test bed in order to really see it function in reality. I mean, the BMBF is the Ministry of Research and Education, by the way. So they get money from the ministry to set up a kind of virtual reality, if you like, a system in this development. It's a very big development that is happening. It's very local, but very big for them. So they would like to be a digital, let's say, the future of a digital urban, let's say, the development. So for us would be also a good test bed to see how legislation can or cannot actually have the right, let's say, effect on a real urban development where people gather very big number of personal data for a good cause. And by the way, just a small bracket that, as you said also before, the elephant in the room is about data governance, after all,
Yes.
So we need to start talking about data governance, what we do with all this data and the capabilities that they are at the moment. They are big. They're going to be even huge compared to when we get the 5G widespread technology, the 6G technology. We have huge amounts of data in all kinds of areas, not just, of course, XR technologies. We have genomics data. We have data that are out there, and nobody knows how to actually work with them. And at the moment, they're just there. Everyone is exchanging data or not. Sometimes they shouldn't be exchanged, they do. Sometimes they should be exchanging data, they don't. So we still need to figure out a way, first of all, to acknowledge the value of personal data resource. So give it a monetary value. So we know actually what we're talking about here, and we know what kind of monopolies are created through that system. But also we need to identify data that should be used by everyone. Everyone should have access to it and create data trusts for that. So whatever.
Yeah, not just only that, but also if you look at these digital twins and also these, digitalization aspect of municipalities or cities. I mean, at the end, the data is most valuable at its origin. So there's also an opportunity for us to guide them, because usually the most answer that you get when you ask them where the data is stored and what you do, usually the common one is, okay, yeah, we are outsourcing it. So basically, they're not capable, or they don't want to deal with this thing. So the easy way out is to outsource it. But this is the other thing. Is it really a long-term good idea to do that? So those are also things where we think we have an opportunity to guide those cities, and not just only cities, but to sort of set a standard and kick off this with our work the next 3 years. And
I think maybe to add, because also regarding this data governance, it's also how you create trust and acceptance of using these technologies. And I think we need to understand much more what are the criteria of trust when I use something and I give my data, where is it stored? These are all issues that you have the governance side, but you also have the user, citizen side, especially in a city where you have the public, the citizens using it. So I think this relates well to working with citizens, integrating them, also stakeholders, with issues of trust and acceptance.
And also, especially when you look at it from a city's perspective or municipality's perspective, citizen participation can be enabled in a different way. Absolutely. Using XR technologies, for instance, with AR, for city planning, various levels. So there is also a good side and a huge opportunity for a city. But on the other hand, we are in Europe, so we need to set some standards.
And you have the opportunities, but you need to be quite careful that you actually are able to include a wide range of different people and not just selected groups, which this problem we have a lot, you know, with public engagement, is who do we actually engage with our methods? And there's huge potential, but I think it has to be done better or correctly to really make it more, inclusive.
Including them and also educating them about these technologies, which are affecting every aspect of our lives and even more the next years to come. Yeah.
Did you have something from Leon or
No,
not?
but
I wasn't sure.
I think now it's time to actually open up and get you included into our discussion, right? We already see somebody coming, so that might be the best time for some questions if you have them. Or comments.
So hi, I'm Dorothea from the Heidelberg University Hospital. So obviously I'm connected to healthcare, and I wonder if you contacted any kind of hospital in Kirchheim as well for your project?
So it's a really small municipality just outside of Munich. So there is unfortunately no hospital. But that's why we said, I mean, it's basically we're testing it in a small municipality. So if it works out, I mean, that's why we actually wanted to have a real life testing of it. Because after that, it's a win-win. Then we prove that it is also scalable and applicable to other cities or going even bigger.
But the health data, I mean, of course, they have like Old People's Home or whatever, and they have in Kirchheim, but the health data is not part, actually, of that problem. We have to say that. It has never been the intention. And whether they have a hospital or not, I don't think that would have been part of what they consider as a digitalization of their... so far.
But that could be something to further discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. German data protection and patient data.
Yeah.
We have a question over here.
Yeah, so Juhis from Finland, Hammer University of Applied Sciences, and I run a small XR team, and usually I'm the person between the problem and the developers. And I usually run into a lot of these things, legislation, standards, guides, good to know practices and all that kind of stuff. And they are in so many forms, and it's very hard to get a grasp of the big picture, so I think these are very important things to proceed and advance. But my question is that from the human-centric design point of view, how all this information and everything that you do, the guide and that kind of stuff, how it should be implemented to the developers and to the persons who will be using it? What's the best way? How do you see it?
May I start? Or?
Yes, go ahead.
Good question, and this is exactly behind our idea in this proposal. So, I mean, to start with, that's the whole thing is about. I mean, we're talking about human-centered, human values. You know, AI framework with human values. You know, we are the European Union. You know, so we just don't, gather data and spread them around. We protect our people. We protect our European values, whatever that is, and definitely we're not either, whatever, China or United States. So we try to find our way, but obviously at the same time we need innovation. We need to have an innovation capacity that will not burden, will not be burdened by own, human-centered approach. So that's where the balance is not clear yet. So there are some studies that show that GDPR, for instance, had I wouldn't say detrimental effect, but definitely they create a lot of difficulties for SMEs. Well, it hasn't been a problem at all for the big conglomerates, even if they do not follow, they are doing completely legal things still, It's the SMEs that pay the price for this kind of legislation. So we have to be careful about that. So our idea here is, first of all, to have a human-centered, let's say, development in this innovation. In this case, we mean also, participatory development. And the idea behind this is also to try to create some kind of standards whereby stakeholders will be able to provide continuous feedback into the development. So Through that, we plan to integrate, let's say, the values into the system. And then we're going to have some case studies that are also going to be done by Fraunhofer, our partners who develop these systems. So it's something to be seen, how far we can go, as a matter of fact. But that's exactly the idea behind it.
This is also the idea why we actually chose a real-life testbed. I mean, it's one thing to talk about the frameworks and come up with another standard. So and that's why I would say half throughout the project, we are also getting to use cases. And that's why having the city involved throughout that, obviously, they are also, we need to say that they have their own funding with the German funding. So we are basically just using that project, since it's enabling the same time, sort of how we can bridge that gap with them and maybe pick out some use cases with them to trouble test, because they will be also enabling AI implemented traffic lights and all that stuff. So it opens up another kind of worms, right? So, and how can we sort of also have use cases that for education, they are building up a new school. So many snippet use cases throughout. So I would say we should talk in 1.5 years when we're halfway through and see where we stand there, and maybe we'll be back.
But we don't have Finland on board either, you know.
No,
we have
we are
Norway,
up north,
but,
so.
Invite to the stakeholder workshops.
Yeah, we can
Any
definitely
other
invite you.
questions? Yes.
Yeah.
First of all, excuse my English.
No worries.
I understand, but speaking is great. Okay. And there is a big goal, the future coming. I have a small example. I am a creator. I draw. When I buy this pencil is mine. It's good for me, and I can draw whenever I want. And there's no one day in Texas looking what I'm doing in my room. No. And I spend a lot of time in a project, Erasmus, I'm doing now, just saying no to things that are boxing me. No? And my Oculus, I can't connect to internet because do what he wants. I pay for it, but it's not mine. It's a weird thing. And it's so stressful. It could be in a future for artists that don't want to fight with the system, like a green, fabulous label that say this is free, this respects your freedom. Take that, and you can trust. No? Because I spend a lot of time and use open brush without connection and that, and in January I'm gonna kick my Oculus, or anybody in the room can hack the Oculus, please. I'm gonna restore to the first version that works perfectly well. Excuse me, I don't know if I don't communicate.
Yeah, so actually a big part also, and that's why Open Air Cloud Europe is part of this, is sort of the open source part and the decentralized part. So this is also what we try to capture and integrate with the interoperability part. So obviously making sure that is also open sourced and the decentralized aspect of it as well. So this is the first sort of part that we'll be working on the first year of an interoperable sort of guide that will hopefully guide the EU Commission in a way as well.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? I can hear some questions maybe, comments? No? Yes, I'm going to give you this microphone. There you go.
Yeah, thank you. Joni Kukkamäki from same University of Applied Sciences from Finland. We have been now discussing a lot about privacy data, that kind of challenges related on XR, but what would be other examples of social or ethical challenges related on XR than all this data and privacy, but do you have other things in your mind that we should solve in near future?
I mean, one part is, and that's maybe why the USN is coordinating this project. So we actually have an XR project actually led by scientists who have nothing to do with XR, by the way. But what they do is there are aspects in also the I thing. So it's also when we talk about accessibility and ethics, is there are a lot of people who are actually physically not capable in experience this thing due to issues with eyes. And we are talking about, I mean, Rigmor showed us that it's like literally 80% of Europeans won't be able. So this is a huge part, and maybe that's the reason why they are leading the project. So there are various from a physical, but also from a mental perspective. So this piles in is a huge component also apart from the privacy aspect. But because this is also another emerging problem that we're facing, physically there are a lot of humans of society not able to actually see XR things. And yeah. I hope this answers your question.
We have time for one last question. I see it at the back here. I'm just going to bring you the mic. One moment. Here you go.
Hi, I'm Nishita from Siemens, and I'm in Munich. So I can relate to a lot of things you've said. One question, though. So I heard, I came in a bit later, but I heard that you said the big conglomerates have got it sorted out with the data privacy and the data rules. It's not true. We don't have it sorted out. But maybe in terms of understanding how your project can help big companies also sort these things out, one aspect, one challenge is how do we get the industrial workers adopt XR a bit more better? Because, you know, workers in Germany, there's Betriebsrat, there's German Workforce Council. So, you know, to navigate that tool is very, very dicey. So how are you planning to address those things as part of it?
We've actually also in a use case discussing that. So we were actually also discussing highlighting when it comes to use cases, for instance, education, schools. But also we are facing a new century where actually employees are forced to wear those glasses, right? They might not have a choice of choosing. So this is another thing, also the implementation of these new technologies into the workforce. It's going to be a huge challenge. I mean, you're just sort of crapped it out. So we actually set up 3 topics of use cases which we think are huge importance. So it's the public sector and then the education and also the industry sector, because apart from that, our project is in the industry sector of the EU.
We haven't started the project yet, but training will be part of it because it's important also for our Norwegian colleagues. They introduced it. So how exactly we're going to go about it? Maybe we'll come to knock on your door. I don't know. With Siemens, but just to clarify, I didn't mean Siemens when I said, if I won't say names, of course, but there are differences between conglomerates and how they view GDPR and how they apply it. And it's always actually the big business they want clear. Everyone wants, of course, but the big businesses are the ones who have to gain more out of a clear legislation. So clarity is extremely important for planning, and we understand that, and everyone wants that, by the way. So, yes.
Great. Thank you so much. That is the end of our time for this panel. Let's give a big round of applause also for getting funding. Well done.
Yes.